ManCavians, this is Bob for the Bob Zen-Scale Man Cave, and today we are making a control panel for my layout. I have Tam Valley switch controllers, an Octopus 3, and the Fascia controllers, which have dual LED lights on them, a red one and a green one. So when you switch the switch, the lights turn from red to green depending on which way your switch has been thrown. So I wanted to build a control panel that incorporated those. Sure, there's plenty of other different ways to make control panels, but no one's really shown how to do this way. So there's some little tricks here and there to try and do. The way I'm doing it is theoretically kind of cool, but this may turn out to be something like how not to make a control panel. Let's take a look. So ManCavians, I'm putting together a control panel for my layout. And this is pretty much my whole layout as it sits today and in the future, with all the switching and everything else that I need to control. So I put together a track plan using SCARM. It's basically a rough track plan, and it's going to be my control board for my layout, for all the remote switches that I have. If you've been watching my videos, you know that I've been using a Tam Valley kind of switch system. So this is an automatic control with two LEDs, a red and a green, and it'll mount right on to the control panel, and I'll be able to determine whether or not it's good to go one way or not good to go on the other way on the switch. What I plan on doing is I got a piece of plexiglass here. So the thin plexiglass, but the same as I did with the other control panel, and it is a little large. It's about 18 inches long, but that should work out just fine. I can put whatever I want on here. The trick is, how do I transfer this plan to the plexiglass? Well, I taped the plan onto one side. On the side that I don't plan on destroying, it's got a film on this side, so it takes and makes it nice and smooth, and I don't scratch up the side I don't want to scratch up. What I did, since I put it on this side here, on the back side you can see through it, and I can engrave using a Dremel tool slightly down inside the plexiglass to create a trough. Once the trough is made, I can then paint in this side of it, and it will be colored the way I want to have it colored on the other side, and it should look pretty good. Then I'll paint this whole back side the color I need after I cut it down to size. So what I have is a Dremel tool, and I have a engraving bit in there. It's a round bit. It's the largest one that they had in the box, and it fits just pretty close right in where I want my track plan to go, the width of the lines. And so this is going to work out pretty good. The only problem is I don't want to go too deep with this Dremel, and so I have to be very careful not to go too deep, just enough to put a little gouge in there but not go all the way through. If I had a thicker piece of plexiglass, I wouldn't have to worry too much about that, but you got to be careful when you're doing stuff. So this does come with a router stand that makes it flat, and you can adjust the height, but you can't see where you're cutting, and so it's pretty useless for what I'm trying to do here. So I'm going to have to do everything by hand and try and keep a steady hand as much as I can, and see how it goes. Remember to wear safety glasses, because this hot plastic is going to be spraying all over the place. So let's get right down to it. And there you go, you just kind of cut down in there, and away you go. I'm going to keep working on this and get back with you, and we'll see how it works. Well, that's just the yard. I'm going to do the main track. Okay, sort of done engraving. I have the first rough draft engraved in here. Now it's just cleaning up the lines, making sure they're about as straight as possible, maybe evenly as deep. So it's just going to take a little bit of work. It's a lot of hand jamming. I wish I had a CNC cutter where I could have done all this with, but I don't. So this is a seat of the pants engraving. Well, here we are. I've got the whole thing ground down. I still may do a little bit of touch-up grinding in these tracks. Well, we'll see how it goes. Some of them are thin, some are just right. But anyway, before I paint this back, I'm going to do a little bit of sanding. Got some 220 grit sandpaper here. It's about the most I could find really at Menards. Probably could use 600 grit, but 220 should be good. Just get it sanded down so that the paint will stick a lot easier to the plexiglass. Don't need much, just need a little bit of roughing up a little bit. Next steps I gotta do is I'm gonna have to cut this right down the middle because I'm gonna separate these two in half. I have two actual panels. I'm gonna put the main one over on one corner and this other one by the yard so I can take a look at it and have a nice looking panel. So let's cut this plexiglass. Okay, I protected the plexiglass with some painter's tape so it easily comes off. It doesn't really stick hard, no gum on it. So I put a little gap right in here is where I want to put the saw blade, and so I'll cut it right along this area here, and also on this side over here I'm going to cut this rough edge off for that other piece, and then eventually get down to the other end over there and cut off what I don't need on that side. So let's get to work. I'm going to use a table saw. Probably, well, in some cases probably not a great idea to do. You can score the plexiglass with a plexiglass cutter, acrylic cutter, and just snap it off, but I found that I was actually scraping up more of the plexiglass than I was cutting it, and so that didn't really work out very well. So I'm going to try a saw. So other people try saws, and so in order to mount one of these Tam Valley switch servo controllers, you need a couple drill bits. You're going to need a 7/32 bit for the lights and the switch, and a 1/8 inch drill bit for the screw. And before I did all this, I marked where I'm going to drill the holes on my plan and secured the plan back to the plexiglass. Now you could do all this before you do all the cutting and everything else, but I kind of got a little ahead of myself. I still need to drill all my holes. I put this onto a piece of 2x4 wood, so I can drill through the plexiglass and into the wood and not break the plexiglass. So as stiff as possible as you can get it, and secure so it doesn't move around and chip. And otherwise I'm starting all over from scratch. And I have 2 holes in here. So hopefully it turns out pretty good. Just got to go slow. I'm going to drill the rest of these out and get back to you. Okay, I drilled all these holes in here to put my switches in. Kind of can see them there like that. Well, it takes a little bit of finesse, but you can get them in there. I did buy the template, or one of the fascia controller panels from Tam Valley, but I got the wrong one. For some reason I grabbed one that has dual switches on it, and then instead of the 3 holes I needed to drill, it had 4. So that didn't work. So I got it lined up so I could measure where 2 of the holes were for the LEDs and where the mounting screw would go through. Even though it's 7/32, you have to drill and round it out a little bit bigger than that so it will slide in. And then when you have your holes lined up, I just put it through the bottom, lined up where the switch was going to be from the top, kind of made a mark with my drill, and then drilled through, and it slides in, and you can punch it in. Now, next step is to paint the back here. I'm going to clean up all this extra little nubs and stuff like that off of it before I do that, and then get ready for paint. I'm going to use this Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch Ultra Cover paint and primer. It's a gloss white. It also bonds to plastic, which is what I'm going to be painting over here. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm just going to paint the back side where I engraved all the tracks in, and make sure it's nice and thick so light doesn't shine through. The paint is now on here. I had 2 coats of white, and that didn't make it dark enough so I couldn't see light through here. I don't want to see any light where there's no traces, so I painted a coating of black on it, and that helped out a lot and kept down any light shining through there. So what I did was I got some of these little picks and carvings out of this set here that I picked up some little discount place called Axeman in Minnesota. It kind of works okay, but it's a lot of carving and picking at the paint to get it out, and it's just taking way too long, and it's hurting my hands actually. All these little knurled edges on there just really cut into the fingers and stuff, so it's not a great tool for what I'm trying to do here, and you don't get all the paint off. So I'm going to go back to using the Dremel and carving out the same traces that I just got done doing earlier to get rid of all the paint. You got to be really careful because you don't want to scratch it and get over areas that you don't want to have see-through. So we'll show you that as I get done with it. Okay, as you can see, I have gotten a little bit farther than where I left you off last time. I ground down all the traces that I had ground down earlier and painted. I got as much white off as I could. It's not perfect, it's my first attempt at this whole thing, and it's a learning process as I go, but I'm taking some Tester's paint, the regular, this kind of stuff right here, and just taking a little toothpick, dipping it in there, and just dribbling it on to the panel. Gotta be careful not to dribble it on another area, which I did earlier with the red. I had to clean that off before I could paint this green on there. And you kind of want to get it thick so it fills in all the space, so it doesn't have a lot of light coming through and it looks a uniform color on the other side. It's going to look pretty ugly on this side, but the other side's not too bad. Where the switches are going, I'm going to paint those a different color. I think those are going to be blue. I think I'm going to go with blue for the switches and go from there. So I'm going to keep on painting and let this dry, and we'll see what it looks like after that. Okay, as you can see, I got most of the colors done. I have put all green as my main line, and all the green is going to be the same polarity. The red is my reverse loops. This is red for the helix. I have orange for this expansion area over into the other room. That right now has no rail on it, so it's basically non-existent. And I have orange over here for my programming track, and I'll be putting in blue where the switches are, and some black around this turntable, and some black over here on this loading track, basically my hump yard. So I'm going to let this dry, and then we're going to paint the blue stuff on there. Okay, I built a frame for my panel, and I cut a blade's width on the table saw, which is right about 1/16 of an inch wide. And this thin piece of plexiglass will slide right in there. It's just a little bit narrower than the blade width, so which is fine. It won't be too snug, and it'll slide right in. These have been gluing for about an hour. They'll dry, and they're pretty dry right now. I use this Gorilla wood glue, which I also use on my track. I'm starting to use this more on my track from now on instead of the silicone clear adhesive. And then once I am done drying this, I'm going to put some Minwax wood stain. This is a clear tint base, which I have colored to a rosewood, and I got this at Menards. So if you want to get the same color or something similar, go ahead and do that. So I'm going to stain these two pieces of wood and get ready to glue the two halves together with the plexiglass in the middle with all the colored paint on the tracks. Okay, there they are stained, two halves. I'm going to let them dry and go to bed. It's late. Then glue them tomorrow. I'll be done, almost. Okay, I've put the panel inside the frame, and I am gluing the two halves together. I did have to resize the plexiglass, and I used a belt sander. I'll raise that up and sanded down the short edge, so it was, because it was just a little bit too long, and the two halves of the frame were not lining up and touching, so can't really glue it together if they're not touching. So I made it a little bit shorter, modified it. You know, it's probably the best way to do it is make your frame equal on all sides and then modify the inside if it's just a little bit too big. And I made mine a little bit too small of a frame to fit the plexiglass, and didn't want to start all over. So letting this glue, and then I'll be ready to start mounting to the layout. Well, I mounted the control panel, used some cabinet hinges. Just folds right down out of the way when I want to put it away. Just fold it back up underneath the layout. It's out of the way. I can climb underneath and get to the helix. And then, you know, you got all the controls that you normally would expect. I want to see what direction something is. I just push the button on that, and it changes the color. Now I know that I'm going off to the right versus the left. So that's how that works. Pretty easy. But there you go, ManCavians. That's how to build a Tam Valley control panel. At least that's how I did it. It's kind of turning out, in my opinion. I'm not 100% happy with it. In fact, it's probably could be titled "How Not to Build a Tam Valley Control Panel," because the way it looks to me is like my granddaughter used a crayon to color in, you know, the lines and everything, and it looks jagged, narrow. It just doesn't look clean, and so I'm not quite happy with it, but it's functional, and you know, I'll remake it someday and see what happens with the next one. I'll figure out a better way of doing it. But if you have any ideas on how to do that, how to kind of do what I did, you know, a piece of plexiglass and make it a lot cleaner looking without using a CNC router, because I don't have one, nor do I want to pay for someone else to do that. Unless someone's going to donate it for free, I can't do that. But just comment below and give me some ideas for the next time. As always, ManCavians, happy mile railroading. Stay off them tracks. Bye. So if you like what you saw here today, go ahead and click subscribe down here below, or follow my Facebook, Google+, Twitter, and my Instagram, links down here below in the comments. Also, click on one of my other links for videos as well. As always, ManCavians, happy model railroading. Stay off the tracks. Bye.